Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Vivid Voltage, make sure you go ahead and check out the Poketown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using the code Omnipoke. For today's video, we're talking battle styles, and we're actually going to be looking at all of the different decks which are brand new, which could be coming out from this set. I think we've got a lot to work with here in battle styles. Not only do we have some great single and rapid strike cards, which I imagine will be at the forefront, but there's a ton of other interesting stuff to go over today. Not going to be a super deep dive today into these deck lists, more so giving you the base knowledge of what these decks are going to be trying to achieve and what engines they have to work with. So let's jump straight into it. I'm going to go through all the Vmax archetypes first, then the Vs, then the single prize archetypes as well. So we'll start with the two Urshifu Vmax decks, starting with Single Strike. Really the core concept is to build up towards the Gmax one blow attack with the help of the Single Strike Houndoom, and hopefully having multiple of these guys in play means that you can go ahead and keep searching out the Special Energy, which is a new version of Strong Energy. You get to do an additional 20 damage for each one of these attached to your Urshifu Single Strike or any Single Strike Pokemon. But in this case, we're trying to make that Gmax one blow, maybe even reach some Vmax Pokemon. You know, if you have 3 attached to you, that's jumping you all the way up to 330, which is a huge number of Vmax Pokemon in the game. And the only one that sits outside that hit points is Eternatus, which is weak to fighting. So the idea is going to be trying to use that Gmax one blow maybe a couple times in the game, thanks to its good fighting type coverage as well. The vanilla 100 with beatdown isn't a bad stopgap for you if you're using it in combination with Boss's Orders and Great Catcher. You can be knocking out Crobats, you can be knocking out Dedenes, so that's really going to be the main thing going on here. There's also the regular Urshifu V, the single strike one, has laser focus, its opening attack, which allows you to attach 2 energies straight onto itself. So the first Gmax one blow shouldn't be too difficult to come by as long as you're not getting immediately knocked out. And then it's using the Houndooms to hopefully get you towards that that second one. My only really concerns about this list is that it's quite setup focused. You're trying to get the Urshifu Vmax is a stage 1, get that guy into play, whilst also getting, you know, probably 2 to 3 Houndooms would be the dream, so that you can chain the Gmax one blow. Now that's a lot to ask for, but that's really the highlight reel of this deck. Trying to chain that attack is not going to be easy because it does discard all the energies from itself. Couple of the hurdles, it's weak to Psychic. There is Jirachi GX, but it's still not the perfect answer for you. Some good things to bear in mind is that we have a really nice Tower of Darkness Stadium, which allows you to discard 1, draw 2. So it's a Make Do Cincino in a stadium. That's a really, really good stadium effect. You have to discard a single strike card, but you'll have tons of those in your deck lists. And other things to bear in mind is there's also this awesome Scroll tool card that you can attach to your Urshifu Vmax. If he takes a big hit and has done that Gmax one blow and taken off a bunch of energies, you can then attach this Scroll, which does 10 plus the amount of damage counters already on Urshifu. So that could be a great way that you could set up an Urshifu Vmax on the bench, as well as, you know, sacrificing the one in the active, but still getting a lot of damage output from it, similar to how we've seen Reshiram and Charizard do a similar thing with Outrage. So yeah, a really decent option here. I think a lot of people are saying that the Rapid Strike is the far better card. I actually think both are pretty okay, and the power is definitely here behind this, so it's going to be cool to see which one comes out on top, but I am sort of enamored by both. I think it is fair, though, to say that the Rapid Strike is more obviously good because it needs less to get going in the first place, and it's normally just a higher tempo archetype, maybe a little bit more flexible because you can still do quite a lot even if you've not drawn so well, which is a lot more appealing. Really, the single strike Urshifu really needs a lot of boxes to be ticked to be doing a lot of things, whereas this Vmax is much more low maintenance and just efficient overall, I would say. So this sort of win condition is going to come through early Gale Thrust damage output, and just by having 1 energy attack cost in there means that you can try and use the new supporter Cheryl, which allows you to heal all of your evolutions and then remove all the energies from those cards. So then you could simply, you know, reattach, find a switch out, get back into your Urshifu Vmax and attack again. Similar to how we've seen, you know, like Acerola work in the Evolving V format. Remember, that was a big combo that Zoroark GX had available to it. Cheryl could be doing a similar thing for the Urshifu. There's also the Gmax Rapid Flow attack, which forces you to discard all your energies attached, but you can do 120 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. And yeah, thanks to the special energy, the Rapid Strike energy, you can attach this and it counts as a water and fighting, which is amazing because it means that Gmax Rapid Flow is only going to effectively be 2 attachments for you, which is really, really easy to achieve. We do have telescopic sights in the format. This possibly could be the strongest tool that Urshifu could use. Some immediate math that springs to my mind is like a Gale Thrust into a Gmax Rapid Flow with a telescopic sight on it could be an easy way for you to knock out something like an ADP that you hit earlier on with a Gale Thrust, whilst also knocking out a Dedenne or a Crobat that you brought into the active position for a 5 prize swing, something like that. So that additional 30 damage certainly can be like really, really important for you. Yeah, there's a ton to like here. Also, having telescopic sight could lead into the other scroll card that Urshifu can use as well. 1 Rapid Flow doing 2 150 damage snipes could then move into a different Urshifu that has the scroll attached, which does a 30 spread like across the entire board. So again, that could be great for setting up those lower hit point V Pokemon that are used for setting up. So this one is kind of more obviously good. I think it can just naturally trade in a ton of matchups anyway. But having additional healing options potentially, some pseudo gusting options with Escape Rope, as well as Great Catcher, Boss's Orders, Fion, these sorts of cards, because Gale Thrust is very efficient at dealing with bats and Dedennes. A lot looks good here for the Rapid Strike list. And I didn't even mention Octillery, but this is just like possibly a 1-1 or 2-2 line in the deck that can help you scout out some cards, be it the energy card, be it the Stadium, which grants you free retreat on your Rapid Strike Pokemon, which is excellent for moving between your Gale Thrust attacks. It can even access a supporter card for you as well, so Octillery can serve as a stamp-proofing mechanism, which is pretty nice for an aggressive deck like this. The next VMAX I want to talk about is Victini Vmax. It's, again, one of these low-maintenance cards. I think if you directly compare it to Centiskorch, there's a lot more impressive things that Centiskorch can do towards the late game, and it becomes like a really huge threat. But the Victini V is just very efficient and is going to always get the job done because it's just a 2 energy attacking Vmax, so you haven't had to roll into Welder or go second Volcanion into Welder. You can go first with this deck, which is really nice, and you can be attacking turn 2 and putting a lot of pressure on. It does 100 base, which is really low, so it's only really powerful if you are attacking into V Pokemon, which is when it jumps up into 220. But 220 is an amazing number. It means you can be extremely aggressive. And the biggest reason why I like the low maintenance of the Victini, it means potentially you could be using your early game resources to build up a Ninetales. Ninetales is excellent because, again, if you go first with this deck and then go into Victini and Ninetales on turn 2, it's kind of a lot to ask for. 2 stage 1s and a number of Fire Energy sort of roaming around. But we do have Giant Half, obviously, still. And if you can gust up any V that's trying to evolve into a VMAX, you basically like immediately win the game on the spot. So Victini V could be very, very strong against a lot of the VMAX decks because you can just like Grinch things very easily, and it should be easier to make a Ninetales than getting a turn 2 boss, but possibly also just playing, quad Victini V and VMAX and like 4 boss and just saying, all right, come up here, Eternatus, with energy. I'll knock this one out, or whatever else your opponent's trying to evolve into. Could be really awesome. So yeah, I like having the option of a fire deck in the format, which has amazing type coverage whilst not needing to Weld at every turn. Obviously, Weld is incredible. It grants you access to a ton of attacks, but when you have a low maintenance fire attacker like this one, it's excellent to be able to, max out on Boss's Orders and just cash in on Crobats, Eldegoss, obviously Zacians, and any evolving V that your opponent's trying to play as well, which is incredible. I think the other thing to bear in mind is that the regular Victini V is actually quite good in those matchups where they are mostly tag team based. So like Pikarom, for example, they do rely on Boltund, which could be an easy pickings for the Victini, obviously. But you may move into the Energy Burst Victini V as well. So possibly you still will be playing a number of Welders in here, but it just feels a lot less reliant than the previous Welder decks. So yeah, the future's bright for Victini. I'm actually really excited by this guy because he's low maintenance and his type covering is like phenomenal right now in the format and will probably continue to be so in the Battle Styles meta. Next up, we have a Corvonite Vmax. Corvonite is pretty cool. His ability just says that he can't be affected by your opponent's abilities, which is very nice. So you're not too concerned about some adverse effects your opponent could be doing to you. And his attack for 2 metal and a colorless does 240, and you can't use that attack the following turn. It's not too bad. It's really good base output. Again, that 240 benchmark is enough to deal with evolving V Pokemon, any small GX or whatever that's on the bench. Thanks to resistance, unfortunately, Pikarom still can survive this hit. But still, very solid damage overall and easily two-shotting Vmaxes, even beating Malolana for the most part. Doesn't beat Cheryl, unfortunately, but that's actually the card that we're going to be trying to take advantage of in this archetype. Thanks to the new Bronzong that we have in the format, it allows you to move metal energies from all of your Pokemon as often as you like. So the idea is going to be make a tanky Corvonite Vmax with coating metal so you don't get hit for weakness, metal goggles so you're even tankier, and move those energies around with Bronzong so that then you can Cheryl the damage that the Corvonite has taken, and then you can move those energies straight back onto the Corvonite as if nothing has happened. So yeah, that seems very promising. Corvonite Vmax has a natural free retreat cost, so it should be fairly easy to move out of the Vmax when need be, because it's otherwise unable to chain attacks. This Corviknight could also end up being slightly weaker than Aegislash Vmax, which we already have in the format, but the list would take the exact same shell and you just replace the Corviknight with the Aegislash. I haven't decided which one's better. Obviously, out the gates, Corviknight is way faster, which is amazing, but that retreat in and out may end up being a bit annoying for a deck that doesn't want to, well, it wants to use a non-draw supporter, and it wants to try and set up multiple stage ones. So it's a little bit awkward to also have, you know, additional switch outs and whatnot throughout. One other thing to note is this deck's probably going to play Zacian V anyway, because it naturally helps you draw cards in the opening turns. It's a optional attacker, which is never a bad thing. And as well as you drawing cards with Intrepid, you could also get energy hits early to get attacking with either Zacian or a Corviknight quickly as well. So any deck that's allowed to play Zacian and attack with it is got some brownie points there as well, because again, you can do some funky things with tempo. If you just have Brave Blade on turn 2, like I was saying with the Victini, you can just outright win the game against some V decks. So that's pretty exciting. Let me know if you think Corviknight is better than Aegislash as the attacking option, because both have their merits. Obviously, in the late game, Aegislash feels way better. Early game, tempo-wise, Corviknight also has the edge, I would say. So, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But I was a big fan of Aromatisse style decks, definitely the Rainbow, Aurora, like box kind of decks. So I'm excited to see Bronzong back in the game. Next up, we have Eternatus Vmax. Now, we obviously know that Eternatus is already out there, but essentially this can do the copy-paste job of Bronzong Cheryl with Weavile Cheryl in the game. So you can have a tankier Eternatus. Kind of harder to see this one working because there's potential, well, so much potential for Urshifu to be around. And yes, you do have Weak Guard energy, but Crushing Hammers still could be in the Urshifu decks for one thing. And there's even the Rapid Strike Fan as well, the Billowing Fan, which can remove Weak Guard energy, and then you're vulnerable, which is kind of worrying for these tanking decks. I think Eternatus and the Bronzong, both those builds are worried about weakness no matter what. So it's cool to see those tanking decks are, at the moment, kind of kept in check just by annoying weaknesses. But yeah, this is an alternate option, and the upside of having Weavile in here as well is you could have Red and Blue that makes you safer against Crushing Hammer as well, because Red and Blue can help you accelerate, so a little nice thing there. I also think that it's probably less clunky than the metal builds to play Eternatus, because you're naturally playing 4 Crobats, so you can Dark Asset much more, and also then get the use of a Cheryl, knowing that you've already drawn some more cards towards, you know, like backup bench Pokemon, etc. Probably a clunkier build than the current Eternatus decks we've been used to, but certainly could be one worth trying, because that heal effect is crazy. I'm really into Cheryl. I think she's going to be a really good card. Also, we have the Venusaur Vmax. This is actually coming out in February, but the Chirim is coming out in Battle Styles. Chirim allows you to attach Grass Energy from hand as often as you like during your turn to everything that doesn't have a rule box. So essentially the idea is going to be you manually attach the game, throughout the game, onto your Venusaurs, but then every excess energy that you see, you're flooding onto the board with Chirim, and that's because the Venusaur has the exact same attack text as the Shaman Prism Star that's on the screen, 30 times the amount of basic energy attached to all of your Pokemon. So we do get EXP share in battle styles, that's coming back, and we also have energy retrieval. We have Turfield to help you get this multiple stage 1s online, and from there you're just going to play some single prize Pokemon. Things like Snorlax, just helpful cards that you can just have in play at any point, sitting there with the XP shares and sitting there with energies from the Chirim. Seems pretty reasonable. Now, yes, you're weak to fire. That's a big problem still in the format. So I believe this will be more on the rogue side of things, but you can see how this is going to work out. You're going to try and just get to, really high end of damage output just by flooding the board of energy cards. Onto the 2-prize attacking decks then. Essentially, this feels like Urshifu Light, where you're playing almost the identical engine with Tyranitar as you would with Urshifu, but the Tyranitar, it has 2 attacks. The first one does 60 for 3, and then you discard, 2 cards from your opponent's deck, I want to say. I think it's something like that. And then you have the 240 damaging attack for 2 dark, 2 colorless, where you discard 4 cards from your own deck. Not ideal to discard 4 from your own deck, but we have seen it work in the past. Currently Excadrill is in the format and is doing reasonably okay, and has that downside. A few reasons why I kind of like Tyranitar as an option is, firstly, you just need less to be in play, because Tyranitar is just a basic and the Urshifu is a stage 1. Secondly, this has a way less awkward weakness. Being weak to grass is excellent compared to being weak to psychic, in my opinion. So that's also a good thing going for you. So yeah, those are the kind of, well, also there's Piers as a potential supporter option, because the main things you're looking for is to never miss a turn attachment, because you have a really expensive attack cost, and then to also spam Houndoom as much as possible, which Piers can help you do, because he can go ahead and search out these dark Pokemon for you. So this could be a lower maintenance build of the Urshifu Vmax. Now, this build will never one-shot opposing Vmaxes, but what it can do is one-shot tag teams very easily. And we know that tag teams are rife in the meta. I think this 240 base damage really gets ramped up by just 2 of the special energy cards, the single strike energies, and that's enough to get through your Pikaroms, get through your ADP, get through Choo-Choo, Mewtwo, those sorts of things as well. So yeah, I think Tyranitar shouldn't be slept on. It's actually pretty interesting. I think the biggest downside for this build compared to Urshifu is that the damage counters that Houndoom puts on the Tyranitar could be way worse for you, because, there's plenty of things that hit the sort of around 200 number, and that could render your Tyranitar useless if they just sort of proactively hit you. Then you're not able to Houndoom because you're too heavily damaged. So that'll be something to look at going forward. I thought about having just Toughness Cape in here to sort of offset that. But yeah, I think this is an interesting avenue. I've seen most people just talk about the single strike Urshifu, but Tyranitar is also here as a smaller build, at least useful right now when there's still plenty of tag teams in the format. I think once rotation happens, the Tyranitar becomes like bulk, basically. But I like the tempo of this deck compared to the Urshifu. It should be easier to set up in the first place. The other 2-prize attacking deck that I've thought of, unsurprisingly, revolves around Zacian. The new sword, the Rusted Sword card, attaches to a Zacian to give you an additional 30 damage. This is a pseudo ADP, but it means that you don't have to spend a turn attaching to an ADP, putting a 3-prizer into play, and spending an attack to do it as well. So it's kind of the remnants of Turbozation sort of coming back to life this time, because you can increase your damage easily enough without the help of ADP anymore, and you can just focus on having more early game Intrepid Sword, Sorcerers, and Turbo Patch activations, possibly even Berserker in the back. If you have 1 Berserker in play and a Rusted Sword attached, you can be dealing 280, which is where you want to be. That's an ADP knockout. So yeah, I think Turbozation could be coming back in the Battle Styles meta. Another thing that I think is great for the deck is Escape Rope. Again, it can help you push things to the bench and take tempo knockouts on things that they really don't want you to do. One real upside is, it moves, the Jirachis and the Snorlaxes and all these annoying 1-prize Pokemon just to the back, so then you can take knockouts elsewhere. So yeah, Turbozation, Tempozation, whatever you want to call it, it could certainly be coming back in a big way, because the damage output is just so easily achievable now. And again, it may be short-lived. It may only be because there are still a ton of Vmaxes a ton of tag teams compared to Vmaxes in the game right now. but I think we'll see sort of how that goes, because again, this Zacian is still very decent at dealing with Vmaxes, because you can simply Brave Blade them before they evolve into the Vmax and remove a ton of energy and play at the same time. So yeah, seems super reasonable. And if you're worried about Vmaxes, you can always chuck in Zamazenta as well. So yeah, Zamazenta is just a crazy, efficient, strong card, and just getting a couple of buffs in the Escape Rope and the Sword make it probably good enough to be a tier 1 deck in its own right, I would imagine, to be honest. Onto the single prize things, and I think a lot of this is going to be looking towards the future, to be honest, because as long as ADP is in the format, it is very difficult for one prize decks to survive, but there's still a decent list here of one prizes going on. We've talked about Houndoom a lot already, and this time we're actually trying to make a lot of use out of those damage counters that Houndoom produces when attaching to your single strike Pokemon. Thanks to Primeape, its first attack just does 1 for 20 and gets rid of a stadium, but for 2 fighting energy, you do 50 times the amount of your bench Pokemon that have damage counters on them. So the idea really is going to be spamming Houndoom once again. That's pulling out these single strike energies, which is again helping you damage buff the Primeape in the first place, which is great. You put some damage on Primeape, and then you're going to try and move it around with Jinx as much as possible, probably even playing Scoop Up Net, so you're picking up Jinx and reusing it a bunch to move these all to your bench so that they're all full of damage. So you're doing, hopefully around, up to that 250 damage output. Could even be 290 if you have 2 single strike energies attached to your Primeape. So there's some big dreamer damage going on here. The Houndoom allows you to keep a chain of attackers going, in theory, as long as you can keep recycling the single strike energies with the, I can't remember what this item's called, but it's essentially a special charge for exactly the single strike energies. So yeah, that seems interesting to me. I've mentioned the new Manaphy in there as well, because you're going to be playing, again, multiple stage 1s, want to have the board full at all times because it's improving your Primeape math. And that could be a great way to ramp up into that damage. Obviously, there's Spiritomb as well, which could end up being just a 1 or 2 of in the deck, because it comes into play and immediately gives itself a damage counter, which again is speeding up the Primeape. So we'll see how that goes. It could be a fun rogue, probably a lot of setup, but there is some, again, really nice damage output potential there. And you're a fighting type, which is currently decent in the format because of Pikarom and Eternatus. And Pikarom wasn't scared off by Colossal before, and neither was Eternatus, so possibly they'll still be in the format even when the Urshis are around, but it's probably a harder ask, I would say. Next up, we've already talked about Chirim in the capacity of the Venusaur Vmax deck, but the more likely, in my opinion, successful grass deck that could come out from this set, based around Chirim, will just be having a toolbox of one prize grass guys. There's a new Tapu Bulu that can do 80 plus 80 more if you discard all the energies attached to it, which is pretty efficient. 160 is a good number, especially because there's good old Dedenne still in the format. Kartana can leave things down to 10 hit points remaining, which is okay on that coin flip. Or you could be flipping coins with Maractus for high damage output as well on that 60 times multiplier for some big highlight reel moments. We have Energy Recycler coming back in the format, which allows you to put a bunch of those basic grass energies back into your deck to sort of have that reload. I think ultimately, again, once ADP's gone, things like this can actually have a chance because it's reasonable damage output that you can cycle over and over again. But for now, they're kind of waiting in the wings. One that could potentially cause a ruckus, even against ADP, is the Selazal Weeping Bell combo, where when Weeping Bell comes into play, it poisons and burns the opponent's active, and the Selazal does a 90 multiplier for each status condition your opponent has on them at the time. So the idea is going to be trying to loop your Weeping Bell, probably with Scoop Up Nets, possibly with Devo Spray Z as well, and also try and weave in Cheer Yellhorn when you can, and leave your opponent with 3 statuses on them, and that means that you can be dealing 300 damage once you're at Pokemon checkup phase between turns. So yeah, that's really amazing. Really good damage output for a Twin Energy attachment. It's a lot of setup though, multiple stage 1s again. We do have Level Ball, which makes it easier to search out both of these stage 1s, which is really nice. We have that new Manaphy coming out as well, which I'm personally kind of hyped for all one prize decks. I think it might be a strict upgrade to Jirachi. Don't quote me on that, but I'm thinking in the early turns it's way better. And throughout the game it does a job as well. So I'm a big fan of the Manaphy, to be honest. It's worse against stamp proofing, but it's good against... It's basically good at every other stage in the game, which I think is exciting. for the one prize decks. So yeah, the Selazal deck probably clunky, but some high damage output payoff there as well. And the reason why I say it could be okay against ADP is just having these statuses means you can one-shot the ADP after its GX attack, which a lot of these other one prize decks can't do. And at the same time, you hit for weakness on Zacian. Just don't mention Cobalion GX. That would make this deck sad, but it's never going to see enough play that people actually start putting Cobalions in, I would imagine, at least. Next up, there's the Bull Juggling archetype. The Galarian Mr. Rhyme does 10 plus 40 more for each Bull card that you discard from your hand. So think about Steelix and think about Baby Blound. It basically has that same effect. It's a 40 times multiplier with 10 base damage. And it's for cards that have Ball in their name. So we're getting Level Ball as a reprint in Battle Styles. The reason why I have a Pokeball on the screen is because the Yamper can recover a Great Ball and a Pokeball from your discard pile when it comes into play. So the idea is going to be you chuck all these Ball cards away, and Yamper is going to be retrieving them for you, getting back that damage output, and you can also scoop up net the Yamper to spam this, so that everything you're discarding with the Galarian Mr. Rhyme can be fetched immediately with the Yamps. That's the idea here. And there's also a new supporter coming out in our Shining Fates set, and it's called Ball Guy. He goes ahead and searches your deck for 3 balls, and that can be really good for early game consistency in the first place, but also is going to be that sort of mid-game damage output for this deck as well. So pretty cool to see. I haven't really built up a Fury Craft of this. I don't know how wild you can go with Ball Search cards. There's the sort of 12 in front of you that you'll probably be playing, and there's quick balls as well, so you can be playing like 20 Ball Search cards, and that's a ton. Maybe there's space for all of those, and the Yampers and the Mr. Rhymes and stuff. We'll sort of see on that front, but one of my biggest bugbears about the one prize archetypes is that you're so worried about having a steady stream of attackers throughout the game, and just naturally having so much Ball Search in the early turns makes your opening hands pretty strong. And it means that you probably shouldn't run out of Pokemon. The only awkward thing comes is if you're spending all of these Ball Search cards in the early turns, you're then running out of damage output as you go as well. So it could be slow to get off the ground, to be honest, but we'll see. It could be fun. Next up is Cataday. This again has been an archetype before, but it gets a really nice new card in Perugly. Its first attack is Cataday, so it can use its 120 damage 4 energy cost attack for free as long as there's a Persian in play. Perugly evolves from Glameow, which also has Cataday, so Glameow was sometimes like a couple copies already in the Cataday deck, so having something that you could already use now have a nice evolution is really important. One of the things that the Cataday deck used to always struggle with is fellow one prize archetypes, because you're trying to set up this snipe damage and knock out things with ear kinesis over and over again. But having Perugly now means you can try and fight that one prize fight against them, where you just do that vanilla 120, and that's often good enough to deal with opposing one prizes, which is really nice. And also, when you are attacking into these Vmax archetypes, 120 then becomes 240 if you can gust them to the bench and use Esper to finish them off. So that vanilla 120 is actually also very, very good damage output. There's also a giant bomb on your screen, and that's because Perugly has weakness to fighting, which means hopefully the Urshifus, whenever they do attack into you, are taking a huge chunk of damage. Or it could also factor in ADP, which obviously always is hitting over 180 damage as well. I don't think Giant Bomb necessarily goes in this deck. I just wanted to mention it as a cool option that can also help you set up your Espers that little bit more easily, and because you're using a fighting weak one prize Pokemon, which is also pretty cool. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Giant Bomb setting up some nice damage for you. Could be interesting because it sets up Esper well for at least the tag team decks. So yeah. And also, again, you get to play Manaphy, which I'm a big believer. I could end up being wrong, but it feels crazy to me. One of the last one prize decks we'll talk about is Indeedy. It has the first attack, which just allows you to draw 2 cards. Its second attack does 10 times the amount of cards in your hand. So we're getting some Selazal hand vibes here, but instead of winning the game with an unknown, instead we're trying to just swing with Indeedy for around that sort of like, you know, if your opponent hasn't hand disrupted you for a couple turns, you're getting into that high 200 kind of category, and that's when it is super dangerous. But the format as it is right now, there's a ton of money, there's a ton of reset stamps, so realistically, Indeedy is not going to get insane, I don't think, but we still have that Selazal hand engine. We know that we are able to get into 30 plus hand sizes. It's a thing that could happen, and when a one prizer can deal that kind of chunk, it's pretty good, to be honest. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. I want to try it out. It's going to have some highlight reel big knockouts when your opponent just doesn't have access to Marnie or isn't playing in their deck. If they're a welder deck, you're really happy to see them. So yeah, Indeedy, pretty fun and dangerous for certain archetypes. So we're going to end on Durrant. It's the return of the Devour deck. The new Durrant is a grass type that has a 2 colorless attack cost, which is really awkward because you need to use twin energies or have some sort of acceleration, be it basic energies with like Coco, Prism Star, and EXP Share, or possibly playing grass energies and Chirim as like a thin line in your deck. But yeah, you need to fill your board with Durrants. You discard a card from the top of your opponent's deck for each Durrant in play. So don't prize any of these guys. Make sure you have a steady flow of them. Be spamming Ornery Rod and have a ton of Ball Search cards in your deck to actually maintain that mill throughout. Try and use some of the disruption supporters that we have. We've seen that like Crushing Hammer plus Lycanroc, Crushing Hammer plus Clefable, or just using it in combination with Yell Grunt can be a way to keep certain decks from attacking you altogether, which is actually quite troll. But for the most part, I think this will end up being quite below the bar. The power creep has got so far that this sort of approach just isn't going to be viable anymore compared to the old Durrant. And the old Durrant had instant access to recover a Durrant as soon as one was knocked out, and it had a basic energy attack cost, which just made it way easier to chain. Any turn you miss the chain of Durrant, you instantly lose the game, basically. And that's just much more likely for this approach. But let me know what you guys think about all the decks that we've covered today. It was really just a base knowledge and really just maybe setting yourself on the path if you want to start playing on tabletop or sleeving up some proxied decks. Hopefully I've teed you guys off with a nice little rundown of how I think these decks will approach the game, what their win condition will be, the sort of main cards that you'll be seeing in those lists. So yeah, let me know if there's any decks that I missed that you're excited for from Battle Stars down below. Let me know your favorites that we've talked about today. And yeah, I'll be back with more Battle Styles content soon. Cheers.